A lie detector test? My face already does that when I'm asked about what I'm doing this weekend.
Jesus.
This is TruthQuest, uncovering the powerful technologies, visionary strategies, and compelling stories that fuel our quest for clarity and authenticity in a rapidly changing world. From groundbreaking innovations to real-life success stories, we take a deep dive into how individuals and businesses are harnessing truth tech to change their lives and create meaningful change. We believe that everyone deserves to know the truth. This is TruthQuest. And now your hosts, Dr. Bryan and Mary Claire.
All right, welcome. I'm Dr. Bryan.
And I am Mary Claire.
And we're your hosts for TruthQuest, where we dive into the new technologies and stories about people's quest for truth and the impact it has on their lives. In today's program, we'd like to address the ways that the media and coercive consumer marketing techniques have introduced fear into truth verification processes, and how through education and empowerment, we can separate truth from fiction and utilize this incredible emerging technology to reduce manipulation and stress without being exploited into a false certainty.
Thank you, Bryan. I yet again have the opportunity to introduce our guest today. Matt is a strategic marketing expert who has worked with companies in healthcare, consumer products, technology, and all across the spectrum. He's also a two-time founder, board advisor, and early-stage investor, and specializes in consumer engagement and early-stage growth. Aside from serving as a VP of marketing at ICANN, Matt is a private pilot and a visiting scholar at the University of Notre Dame. When he's not working on the latest behavioral technology startup, he's probably performing at a comedy club in Atlanta. Matt is living proof we can be strategic and engaging while doing it with integrity and empowerment. Matt, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, you guys. Thank you for that intro. So much. That was so much. It was a lot.
As I told somebody else, I feel like we're Bryan in particular is often the ultimate hype man. So I'm just trying to do my best.
It was awesome.
Matt, welcome. I'm so excited to have you on and hear your story, but bring your expertise into the subject we're attacking every week. So first and foremost, let's get to know Matt. Matt, tell us a little bit of your story to kick it off.
Yeah. Well, this is a joy. I'm just thrilled to be doing this, and I'm glad that we're able to talk about all this stuff because I think it's interesting to people, and that's kind of where that's kind of how I got into marketing and advertising. Is I was interested in it, and I started a career in entertainment. I was living and working in Las Vegas, if you can believe that, and it was an
with your own show,
life.
Matt. Did you have your own show?
I didn't have my own show. I was actually, you know what? I was actually really deathly afraid of performing, even though I was doing it twice a night. And
oh my gosh,
I was terrified of getting out on stage. I hated it so much, and I was playing trumpet. That's what I used to do, and I do some arrangements for shows and things like that too. And I realized it was actually that fear actually became the catalyst for a lot of things. Humor being one, but just getting over it was an interesting journey. But yeah, it was an interesting time, and I got to play for some really cool people and learn about how you take an abstract and build something out of it. I think that's the value that came from that. You know, seeing something come incomplete in its infancy, and then put some actual steps behind making it happen. That was pretty neat.
Yeah.
That was kind of like how that started. And I expressed interest one day in working in a different area, and I got hired as a music supervisor at the Wynn Hotel, and they were starting to self-produce entertainment and shows, and that led into more of an administrative production role. Learned the business a little bit. Eventually started working in advertising, where I started working with healthcare clients. So a lot of health technology, a lot of medical devices and pharmaceuticals. That was crazy. Let's just throw that out there. That is a weird place to be, but very interesting and fascinating. And then I eventually started working on the consumer side, which is really, I think, the entertainment piece really came into play there. Went out with a few people and started a little media tech company, which was really interesting. And we're doing a lot of consulting as a result of that. Then started working with big associations, and then eventually startups and incubators as a result of that work, then investor networks and individual companies. And that's how we those are kind of the bullet points, and that's the journey. But they're
You skimmed over that last section, but when you put it all together, I feel like you've lived about 4 different lives, given the lack of gray hair that you have. I'm not quite sure how you've done it all, but
well, no one can see that I am bald.
Matt, they didn't need to know that. We're not on video.
There's no hair left. It's all out.
Well, welcome, Matt. We're excited to have you.
What a great background, Matt. We're excited with your expertise, and I want to kick it off with a question that is one that most people are probably not thinking of. Many of us have seen the documentary about the social media platforms, and they had a statement in there that has kind of caught on and resonated with people, which is, if you're not paying for it, then you're the product. Yeah. And, thinking about coercive marketing, manipulative marketing, the way that marketing moves us to behaviors and actions, love to talk with you a little bit about your perspective on this. What is it? How should we think about it? How do we see it? And how does it influence our lives?
No, it's a really awesome topic because it's a concern that isn't spoken about openly. And it's in a lot of industries. Anything interactive right now it's coming to light. There's now consumer chatter. There's everyday people talking about this stuff now and curious about it. But I've lived through, for context, even just 20 years ago, we certainly couldn't do all the things we could do today. And it wasn't even at the same level. It was just in its infancy, and
Right.
And even 10 years ago, it was still just learning to walk. And we've now gotten to a point where even with cookies going away pretty quickly, we're still learning a lot more about people than we ever have before. And it's coming up as a concern with not just consumer products, but also services, especially in healthcare or behavioral services. And that's where I Can Know really sits, so it's good that we're talking about this stuff. And I think people understand that data is collected. I think we all, as adult people, know that we're giving our email and our name, and and people can you can see basic information about somebody. But what a lot of folks don't know is that there's actually a really big strategy behind. You're taught this in business school. They sit you in a room and they say, okay, this is how you get someone to buy something. And you think, okay, great. We all did, price, promotion, and placement. 3 Ps are one thing, but Bryan, as a, behavioral economist, I'm sure you can appreciate there's a lot of other things going on there. And so here,
For
some of the
sure.
basics. Yeah. And so I think that the ones we can probably easily understand is that, you might have a different price point. Airline tickets are a great example, or hotels. You have a different price point based on where you're at, how often you're looking, the frequency of your purchases. You're getting a dynamic price based on you as a consumer profile, and they might not even know your name. They just might have a token on you. So there's an algorithm doing that. There's also just behavioral nudging. That's what we would call FOMO. That's the fear of missing out. But the issue that can get really highly orchestrated, and in relation to all the above. The other thing is just targeting based on emotion. We can definitely do that. They call it micro targeting. It's something that we can go deeper on these. Micro targeting, a really good example of why that is crazy is during, let's look at political events. There was a January event that we all are very familiar with. When that happened, a lot of marketing triggers were activated, and a lot of people took advantage of that social unrest. And there was a lot of emotional manipulation that was staged and ready to go, in split testing on a lot of different products. We're doing it. And so if you think about that, it's really coercive. It's more taking advantage of an existing situation. Really, that's a little bit different. But you can do that, actively. You can appeal to fear and bias. You can divide people easily that way. You can draw some lines here. There's also a thing called an echo chamber, and that's really what that is. You're essentially forcing someone to echo back to them what they already believe, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise.
Yeah,
right.
We see that
yeah,
all over the place.
Yeah, it's everywhere, right? And some people think that it's quote unquote meeting the customer where they're at.
Yeah.
But I don't agree with that. I think it's a really gross misinterpretation of neurolinguistic programming. So I took an NLP certification once, and it was interesting how you, and I'm not practicing. I would say for me that's hard to maintain proficiency with. But if you wanted to take one of those classes, it's interesting because one of the things they teach you is to mirror language and behavior back at somebody. And
Right.
and so if you're seeing a brand or a product kind of do that with you, visually or just in content, it can be psychologically reinforcing for you, and then you develop that associated preference to that thing. And they're also doing, and when they do that, they're also creating a halo, essentially, which there's another thing called the halo effect, and that's where you gain that positive affinity with something, even though it might not be directly related to the service or the action that you're taking. So because they've done that with you, they've reinforced your echo chamber, they're creating a halo. Now every time you think of walking a dog, you're not thinking of PetSmart, you might be thinking of Target for some reason. So that's kind of how that works. It doesn't have to be related. Not so much coercive, but it can be. It can really be that way. There's also dark.
Matt, just one question that comes to my mind on this is that on the one hand, you think about coercion, but then you also think about manipulation. And, in my mind, there's a little bit of a difference. Coercion, I feel like, is forcing me to do something that I recognize and don't want to do. Whereas manipulation feels to me like something that I don't even realize is happening to me, right? Like it used to be that I got so much education out of advertisement, like, oh, it's teaching me about something new that might help my life or in new ways. And now it feels like so much of this is manipulation behind the scenes of, do I even really know what's happening to me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's an interesting point. And there's a book that outlines this that's really old. It's called Ogilvy on Advertising.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it.
And David Ogilvy is, a hallmark standard of the idea that an ad should be. And I agree with this, by the way. I think this is awesome. And it's old. We're talking like decades old here. And I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. I don't know the exact year, but this is kind of like pre-Mad Men era, and the idea was you're going to present the person with information and allow them to make the decision. It's how you present it, but that's the point, is information. And end of story, and it's not to detract from the fact that you're trying to get them to take an action, but you're relying on, you presented the right information to the right person at the right time, and you leave it up to them. And ultimately, that's the safest and best, and it still is. That's the best way to build brand affinity and repeat customers. That's trust.
I was about to say that. I mean, that's the core of even I Can Know, of creating a foundation of trust and transparency, and it's true all over the place, including what we're talking about now.
And feels like it's a long-term relationship build choice, right? I mean, if you think about an advertising from a company that's trying to build a relationship, if I'm being manipulated, that doesn't feel like a long-term solution for success. Whereas if I can get a foundation of what's really going on and really understand and make good decisions, I learn to trust that brand. I learn to trust that process, then I get better results. Is that true?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, because now, you can ask somebody. Now the concept comes in of, and this, you I don't know, depending on your mood, I suppose you can interpret this differently as a customer, but now as a customer, the brand can ask you for something, because it's really hard to say no if they ask you for something, like a review, favor, a exchange of time for some, then it becomes something that's a little more easy to attain when you have trust. It's all easy. And what you're also talking about, there's one more point I wanted to make, which was, there's something they call, it's, you could call it data-driven UX, but some people might call it a dark pattern. And that's essentially what you're talking about with the coercion, is you're now stuck in a loop you don't know how to get out of. That's like automatic subscribes. You don't really know how to find the terms and conditions. You don't know what you're really clicking. You're just kind of clicking through it. Things aren't transparent. And if they are, they're hard. They're purposely designed to be hidden. Things like that.
This is a personal pain point of mine, Matt. I have an 85-year-old father, and every time I visit him, I have to look at his computer and undo all of the things that have been loaded on his computer. I'm like, Dad, where did this come from? And he's like, I don't know. I didn't click on anything. I have no idea. Right. And you know what it was is like, he installed something that had those other things that were attached and installed automatically, and he didn't know how to uncheck it. But so your point is really well taken, Matt, that we're in a place now where in some cases the marketer doesn't even care how it gets there.
No,
Right.
we
And they're
don't.
just,
I mean,
and
we do,
it
but
really
yeah,
is low integrity in a lot of ways.
it's very low integrity. It's the same thing that happened, like, when you'd get a phone call. I remember my grandparents would get these phone. My grandfather would slam the phone against the wall afterwards because it would be
Oh man.
someone selling a penny stock or
Yeah.
a magazine subscription or
Right.
whatever, and they would act as if, especially with like a new healthcare thing or the stocks, they would act as if the world was going to end unless they
Yeah.
didn't sign up. And then once they're signed up, it's like it's like you got to get a lawyer to get you out of it.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there was a really famous thing with music clubs, and they would send you tapes and tapes and tapes and CDs and CDs and CDs, and you could almost like never unsubscribe
Oh,
from it.
that
You'd
happened to my
you'd get the
brother.
first 10 for a penny, and then the rest of them
Yes.
would come.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yep. And then you're
But
like,
this leads
why?
right into the scams that we're currently dealing with as well, right? I mean, you've got so
Mhm.
many of this fake marketing.
Yeah.
I mean, I just got one the other day. It was amazing. I was amazed. It was it was a DocuSign email that wanted me to click on this to DocuSign for some document that came from a place that was not anything that was legitimate. And I was just marveling at how well they had camouflaged that. It's really gotten to the point where I can't tell the difference in a lot of cases.
And we're making, we as I say, we as an industry, it is a science because there's
Yeah.
so much data overload. We're hoping now that you'll click on it. Now,
Yep.
I'll say this though, I've always been really, really aware of that kind of thing. I think if you work in corporate ever, and you get those like, trainings on what does a phishing email look like, and ways to spot it, and they're hyper vigilant because if it just takes one employee to click on it, and all of a sudden someone's in your
That's right.
server,
Right.
so we're really, that trained me to be careful about it. But now it just makes me mad because it's just not how I was brought up
Yeah. Yeah.
in marketing.
Well,
I was never taught to do those things. Yeah.
is there a quote unquote fix, or is it? We talked to Barrett a couple episodes ago, and it seemed like almost a chicken and the egg.
Mm-hmm.
We see a hole, we fix it. Somebody finds another hole, and that was with respect to AI. Just curious, and he recommended anybody dealing with AI take the equivalent of kind of a Hippocratic oath that doctors have to take. But I'm just curious, what is it just a matter of getting good people in the right seats?
I think it could be, because you've got it really could be, because when we started this journey, I think one of the first things I said for the listeners, I do work with I Can Know. That is my employer. Bryan is my boss. Mary Claire is my colleague. We work on these projects together. We bang our heads against the wall together. We trying to figure out how to be as authentic as possible. And I think from day
Yeah.
one, I remember saying I will not do certain things to get,
Right.
because if we wanted to get people, and everyone should really hear this, if we wanted to be the next flash in the pan dumpster fire to get you to click on things, we could, anybody can, but we're not doing that. We made a distinct
Yeah.
choice not to do that because there's an industry here that is in desperate need of repositioning, and we're trying to do that. And Mary Claire, you're finding partners who are coming along for that ride,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
they want it too. So this isn't just about our technology. This is about redefining the space, and I think that's the antidote. And it's just got to
Can you
happen
speak
one
more
next year.
about that, Matt? I think you're raising something that's really interesting. I would argue that marketing has actually destroyed the lie detection, practice and area. I mean, that whole way they've gone about it has made it very suspect. Now, maybe the technology is partly to blame as well, but what do you say about that, and how would we do that? I mean, I love that you've talked about how we're doing it differently, but maybe dive into that a little further.
Yeah, I think that the biggest, here's what I've noticed. I'll tell you that the first issue is that companies aren't taking a brand forward approach to this. They're taking a product forward approach, which is fine, and that's valid, but we don't live in that world anymore. And it's kind of like trickle down economics in a way. A lot of people think that the best way to move forward is the old mentality of trickle down. You give enormous tax cuts in one place and everybody else should benefit. Doesn't Our economy's not set up like that anymore.
Right.
It doesn't work the same way. It's not, I'm not saying it's invalid. It just doesn't work the same way. There's subtlety now, and so whatever your political leanings are, I mean, that's, we can, argue that all day. It's not as simple, so, but in this case, taking a product forward approach, that was the way to do things for a very, 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 very long time. But because we have so much interaction with customers across so many touch points, which we do not design anymore, there's an argument that you are not really in control of your brand. The customer is. And I really didn't understand that until recently. And I'm going to full admission. I mean, the industry's been saying it for years. Thought leaders and gurus out there are saying it for a long, long time. There's now university research, published research, that's backing, something, the empirical truth that control of your brand presence and persona it's been, not only do you not control it or own it, it's harder to quantify it. So mergers and acquisitions even comes into question. So I guess what I'm saying is the brand forward approach has to be number one, but the only way to make that work is just to have a baseline of integrity and transparency, because people will everyone can smell inauthenticity.
Right.
It's one thing to not be as refined, but working on it, that's fine. If the product's not perfect, no one's product is perfect, that's fine. But as long as there's a baseline of understanding that the customer is going to be well taken care of and you're not hiding anything from them, then I think that's the way to move forward.
Matt, in what ways, just for folks that are maybe newer to this space, in what ways, just basic examples, are consumers more or less in charge of brands?
Yeah.
How does that play out?
They're, people are, because they're voicing their opinion, basically.
Yeah.
And they're sharing. And whether or not it's intentional sharing, it is shared. So that's your thing. Social media isn't social media. It's just media now.
Yeah.
It's not
so well said.
There's no quotes anymore. It's just that is what we have. So whether or not you intend on, your intention is to network or share or get likes and followers or, like somebody else's things or whatever, that's nice. But, whatever's out there is being interacted with and shared between people, whether or not you want them to know that you're interacting with it necessarily or not, or what your opinions are. People are drawing their own conclusions. They're just interacting differently. So the control isn't there anymore. Before we used to be able to, like, think about it in the early 2000s. If Nike came out with a new concept for a product, a branded product like Air Jordans, that's a branded product under the parent brand. Mm-hmm. They would control the entire narrative on that new Air Jordan, the entire thing. Ford with a new Ferrari, same thing. Those are very masculine examples, but a fashion brand, anybody, like you put a new line out and that entire narrative is in a box and they own it. They controlled every aspect of it. Now you really want to put it out with the right intentions so that it doesn't have a mind of its own in a way that's detrimental to you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Kind of, airlines are a great example of that too. If someone gets in a fight on a plane, that's associated with the airline, not necessarily the people. And I don't know if that's fair, but it happens.
So pulling this back to lie detection, let's pull it back to there and just reframing, helping the industry reframe itself and reposition itself.
Yeah. So great question. Yeah. The way that I'm seeing this right now is that people have, for better or for worse, made assumptions about what lie detection is and is not. And there's an allure that has happened. And it tends to attract folks that you might not, and this is not to say everybody, this is this is not to broad stroke and stereotype, but I think it attracts people to be practitioners in the space that have a very gotcha mentality. And it's alluring to law enforcement still, and people don't understand that it's not necessarily admissible or even legal.
Yeah.
And yet people think that it's used, so what's happened inadvertently is that the general public has bought into the idea that if you are going to need clarity, you have to take a polygraph exam and go to a practitioner who may be capitalized, intentional or not, is probably at some point may have capitalized on the idea that you're already stressed. Now, if it's an independent source, maybe there's less bias there. But if you're in a law enforcement situation and they're looking to do some investigative reporting, whether or not it's admissible in court, if they're just trying to get a baseline test on something, people know that can be just the pressure in the situation and the inaccuracies that can happen as a result of it can cause a lot of false narratives to happen.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't help with perception. And so we just have a lot of misconception of what it is in general. We don't understand the history. Everyone thinks that lie detection equals polygraph. It's not. It's a lot more complex than that. And I also think the other side of this coin is that the industry itself is really bad. And I'll be critical on this. Our partners know this. But it's hard to re-educate and lift them, move a mountain. Everyone's so solidified in this thinking. And then now you add the fear of, how is AI using my data?
Huh. Yeah.
And how is my user data? Because now we're digital. So, okay, I signed up for an account, and people need to know too. That's like, when you sign up for something, they're not just getting, your name and your email. We're getting IP address, we're getting browsing history sometimes, whether we want it or not. We're getting device information, location data. If we've got a Gmail address that you use, sometimes your purchase habits come through. We can see your social media behavior too, likes, shares, comments, subscribes. Inferences can be made. Now, a lot of companies, not necessarily in our industry, but a lot of companies do and use that information to get better targeted advertising.
Yeah.
And that's fine, I think, as long as they're presenting relevant information to the right person and they're not doing that to manipulate them. You could argue that advertising is manipulation, but if it's truly something you need, for example, I don't want to send, if I'm a government agency and I'm trying to send, a social service to somebody, I want to make sure that I'm spending my dollars efficiently so it goes to the right type of person. Obviously, I'm not going to send that to the wrong human. So there can be good uses for it. There can also be manipulative uses for it. I think people are afraid that if we correlate digital footprint to a lie detection technology, that somehow their big brother's watching. And it's not true.
We get that question a lot.
Yep.
Yeah. And I wanted to make sure we address that because, one, it's a relevant question. Let's validate everybody. It is a relevant question. But two, the tech is not good enough on our side, on anyone's side. And we can confidently say this because we provide to the government agencies that use this tech as well. So let's list those, if you don't mind. We're talking about the United States Department of State, the NSA, the CIA, the Department of Justice, U.S. Army, different branches of
the G2.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is a global, tech, and we're taking that and using a slice of it and making it available for consumers. And I think that even of itself doesn't necessarily add comfort to the question, but just so everybody knows, even though we're still providing it to all of those enormous, well-known entities that are government related, we can't correlate. The test takes too long to instantaneously correlate that information. We're not passing the data. It doesn't know you from Adam.
Yeah.
And that's a control factor. So they have to understand that too. The test will not work if we give it the wrong information. So it can't know male or female. It can't know where you live. It can't know. It's not, one, it's irrelevant.
It is irrelevant. Yeah.
Yeah, and so if we can take the stress out of it by saying, okay, look, yeah, you're going to sign up for an account. That environment never touches our test environment. There's only a token that passes, and it doesn't pass any demographic or psychographic poll. There's no footprint that comes through. So when someone signs up for our tech, and I think a lot of others in the industry as well, no one's doing that, and it's fully separated. These are separate
Yeah.
environments. They do not talk to each other. The payment processor doesn't even correlate to the account sign up information until after the payment's made, and we don't see test information based on that. We only see
Yeah.
what's to validate the transaction with it's the right person, right? That's it. And that's all we do. It's an accounting measure, but that never, ever, ever crosses into what was done in the test. It's a totally separate environment. And I think people need to know that. So I don't know. Does that
Well,
kind of get to it a little bit?
yeah, well, I think this actually keeps coming back to just one, doing this the right way by building trust. And that's the long way to do it. It's the right way to do it. And it's a way to build a lasting brand, which was kind of where we started this brand forward, taking this brand forward approach. So what I'd be curious about is that how let's pull that even again, but kind of back to what you're doing or what we're doing at I Can Know. What is that new approach, and what is our belief that will kind of lift the whole industry and the truth verification industry, if we will. We can say lie detection, we can say truth verification. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the new approach and almost the new hope, if you will, in terms of how to create access to truth verification, which is our vision.
Yeah, it's a tool for empowerment. It's not to say I got you, I caught you. It's to give yourself a data point, and I think that's the end of the sentence.
I love that approach, Matt. If you said, this is the starting point. It's not the ending point. It's the starting point. It's the point at which you say, this is where I am, and now I've got a foundation on which to move forward from. That I love that. That's very powerful.
Yeah, and let's talk about the differences in the test options out there, right? And there's polygraph is one thing, but we also have voice stress analysis, which we know is largely awful and doesn't work.
Right.
No science behind it.
Right. And then we have polygraph, and then now we have a digital polygraph, and now we have ocular motor deception technologies, which is what we use. And so considering all the above, now the other crazy thing that people could do if you wanted to spend thousands of dollars and take an enormous amount of time and find a place to do it, you could technically get an fMRI scan and lay down in a flatbed scanner, a human-sized flatbed scanner hooked up to a bunch of electrodes, and and have wearing a lead vest, and then have somebody behind a cement wall talking to the mic saying, asking you funny questions. It would be that sounds relaxing to me and accessible.
It's not stressful at all.
That's definitely
exactly how you create access to a key data point in your decision making.
Like there's
sign me up.
It's a huge investment and definitely stress free. Sounds like a spa day, So and, it's not something that is accessible to people. The tech is there, it works, but I don't think any one of us like laying down in a human sized flatbed scanner. So I think the other side to that is the way that we're going to lift all ships here is just empowering the people who are using polygraph today to re-educate their audiences, in many cases, re-educate clients, and allow people to take a deep breath. Because in the past, yes, lie detection has been used to kind of trap people in movies and in TV. There's an allure behind it. That does help people generate an interest, but we're applying this to everyday life situations. This is this is used in law enforcement. It's used in screening. There's a method here that is making life easier rather than trying to add complication. And I think that's what people need to know. And to be very clear, this isn't like this technology does not go into a casino camera system and look at your biometrics, listen to your voice.
It cannot be used in the presidential debates.
It can't be used
cameras.
Exactly.
We get that one often.
These tests take 15 minutes, people. This is to get an accurate result. You have to have control questions. You have to answer clearly. You've got to measure your pupil dilation, and it is not, no supercomputer and or AI can do that instantaneously or even in a short moment. It takes about 15 minutes to get this right. So
that's an important point though, Matt, right? There's serious science behind this. It's not just some magic that you can throw out there and have it happen. It takes, there's a process it has to go through.
yeah, and it's not going to, it's not like Siri can just decide, or Alexa is listening and decides if you're lying or not, and then, tells your wife. That's not, that's not how it
Well,
works.
well, to the point of doing this the right way, there's this, I think the balance we are running is how do you create an experience a consumer would expect in today's world,
Yes.
balanced with the required accuracy in science, the algorithms, everything has to be, there's so much depth on the back end, but layering on a consumer facing element to make it, again, easy to access. So that's that balance. And I kind of tell people, if like, the test, you've got a light shining in your eye so that it can, we take thousands of pictures of your eye over a 15-minute window. If it was as lovely as lying in your bed going to sleep at night, it probably wouldn't be effective. So there's that balance.
Yeah, for sure.
And the implication is that you can use this in different, it's not just about fidelity or catching your teenager doing drugs. There's industry application here that's actually helpful. We have clients that come to us, right, and say, hey, I just need to prove to my employer that I wasn't abusing substances because I work in a regulated industry. But the urinalysis test they paid for was basic level. It didn't know the difference between Benadryl and a methamphetamine. So it's kind of like,
we've spent an hour on that alone.
Yeah. See, we've definitely seen that. Maybe we'll do that for one of our future podcasts.
Right. And I think that's the point, is this isn't just a got you. This is use it to make your life easier. Prove to your attorney, even you're in a custody battle. Did these things happen? Okay. I passed
We've
a
done
line
that too.
saying no, they didn't happen.
Truck drivers coming to us. There's all sorts of fraud in that industry, of somebody pulling in front of a truck driver just to get the dollars out of the accident. And truck drivers coming to us to prove that the accident wasn't their fault is another example.
And it's a data point, right? And this is
exactly.
And for the everyday person listening, this is what we're trying to do, is make it accessible, to your point. So, normally you'd sit down, you'd get a pre-test evaluation, you'd get a long explanation, you'd schedule it, you'd go to a practitioner's office, you sit down, you hook up a bunch of wires, you answer the questions. It has to be human interpreted. It takes time. And sometimes we don't have time, especially if it's a sensitive situation as well. If somebody is saying, hey, my kid is having this situation at work or school, and I want to make sure that they're being 100% truthful about this, or at the very least, some of these points are true. Do I need to be concerned or not? You can pop in a standard test and just figure it out. You can do a custom. You can also customize these questions, right? You can make these very, very specific if you need to. And it's meant to empower people, not say, I got you. Alexa was listening, and I know you're having 3 extramarital affairs. That's not how this works. So, but yeah, I think there's a empowering approach here that we're taking to this that is appealing to folks. That's not scary. So what we're trying to do is change the narrative that this is a tech to help. It's not a tech to observe, listen, and make judgments. It's a data point. It's not Big Brother. It can't do that. It's impossible for it to do it. And we aren't going to let it do that either. We don't believe in that. It doesn't help us, doesn't make us any money. It certainly doesn't help the consumers. So just taking fear out of the equation,
Yeah.
You can apply this to your everyday life. Accountability is a huge thing too, right? Therapy, recovery. We talked about that. You guys talked about that on another episode.
Yeah.
This has been fantastic. I really appreciate everybody's perspective on this. And Matt, it's been such a pleasure to have you here. Mary Claire, Matt, any final thoughts or comments before we wrap up?
I have a question. Matt, if anybody wanted to find you at a comedy club in Atlanta, where might that be?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
He didn't know I was going to ask that question.
Guys. Okay. Well, I usually do some open mics around town. I go to the Laughing Skull Lounge quite a bit. That is a speakeasy style club in the back of the Vortex restaurant on Peachtree Street. So you can, it's probably one of the nicer ones in town. I do that. I do Alley
Nice.
Stage a little bit in Marietta, and various others. You might see me pop up at some other ones too.
Just to plug Matt, immediately before this podcast, we had to stall because I was laughing so hard I was crying at some
We
of the
highly recommend
shenanigans.
you. That's right. We highly recommend you catch Matt someplace around
Yes.
Atlanta.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you for
appreciate
joining us
this.
today. It's been really great to get your expert perspective on these questions. And it's clear that a ton is changing, both from the marketing as well as the tools and everything that goes into identifying truth and understanding what is accurate and what is honest. Thank you to all of our listeners. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, we hope your quest for truth is successful.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of TruthQuest. If you'd like to be a guest on our show or would like to customize a solution for yourself or your business, email us directly at answers@icanknow.com. TruthQuest is brought to you by the #1 truth verification technology available today. Visit us at icanknow.com to learn more and stay tuned for the next TruthQuest.